Good evening, everybody. It is I, and I have one thing to say. Hey, you guys, do you want to do a dungeon with me? So this is the first show, so I figured I should explain that little intro. I have a very lovely woman in my life. She's wonderful. She keeps me on the straight and narrow. She helps around the house. Okay, she does a lot around the house. Let's be serious. We'll just call her Carla. Carla has a little problem with my online gaming habits. She tends to walk past me, and in the craziest voice she can muster, she will say, "Hey, you guys, you want to do a dungeon?" Just gonna say, if you ever game with me, I've never said, "Hey, you guys." So after repeated explanations on why we should not do this, she continued to do it. So I am doing this show kind of revenge, embracing it. I'm gonna do a show on gaming. I'm going to break the show up into three segments. I will post it in three separate videos on three separate days. The first will be a review. The second will be technical aspects and reviews, etc. So let's all thank Carla for giving me this great idea. Now, before we get into our show, we'd like to say a word to our sponsors. First, there's our chauffeur service, pickup drop off, daycare services for the staff provided by Anita Break, and maid services by Harasses Dragon. And if you have any problems with the show or any content I produce, please see our complaint department supervisor, Helen Waite. That's right, if you complain, go to Helen Waite. And finally, our legal sponsor, Do We Cheat 'Em and How? Do they cheat you? Oh, how? Anyway, on to the game. So tonight's game is Destiny 2 Witch Queen. Now, I'm generally new to Destiny 2. At this point, I probably have 3 hours total on Witch Queen, maybe 2 weeks total on Destiny 2. I love Destiny 1, but I'm not going to go back and do a review on that. I'm going to start with Destiny 2. I'm going to start with Witch Queen. That is the newest expansion. My first impressions are it's a great game. It has very good graphics for an MMO. As you know, MMOs got to keep their specs a little lower than other AAA titles so that they can appeal to a wider audience. Luckily, this is cross-platform, and the next generation of console has already come out, so it does have really good graphics for an MMO. It has good crafting systems. It has decent combat. I find PvP a little repetitive, as there is no real surprise spots like Call of Duty where you can camp or you can prone and fool people and thinking you're dead. All you really do in PvP or Destiny 2 is run, slide, pop your caps, get behind an object. That's basis of combat on there. But overall, still a good game. Speaking of PvP in Destiny 2, there is one added addition, not particular to Witch Queen, but particular to Destiny 2, and that's called a Gambit. Now, I really like the idea of the Gambit. I wish other games had it. So in PvP, it's always a team versus a team. You're trying to cap the other team, regardless of what the side option is. Oh, capture the flag. Your still main goal is to kill other players so you can get to that flag. Not so in Gambit. So in Gambit, you face off versus AI, PvE, whatever you want to call it, and you collect motes by killing them. These motes allow you to send enemies to the other team's side to keep them from getting motes, or to open a portal to their side so you can kill their players to disrupt them while they're trying to get motes. And of course, they can do the same to you. Or eventually summon what they call a primeval, a big bad monster, and the first team to summon their monster and kill it wins. So not only is there a PvP element, i.e., opening the portal to the other side to harass the other team, but that's not the goal. Harassing the other team is just a option, a strategy you can employ to get to the goal of being the first team to summon the primeval and kill it. Sorry, my sinuses are really bad today, but we're going to press on. Thank you, everybody. I'm not a big PvP person myself. I'm still learning a lot about this game, but like I said, in general, I like it. It is not really taxing on my system. I'm using older equipment. If you can't see by the recording, I am using an RX 560 AMD graphics card, which is not really recommended to do stream recording on, but it's doing the job pretty well. And that's how undemanding Destiny really is. It does tax my CPU somewhat, but again, it's an i5, not the top thing for gaming. So the next thing I'd like to discuss is raids and dungeons. Raids and dungeons exist in Destiny 2. They exist in Witch Queen. In fact, some of their most popular dungeons from a expansion called Forsaken was just sunsetted, i.e., can't be purchased anymore. If you already own them, you can still play them. And it's kind of a misnomer because you can still buy the dungeons, you just can't buy the story content from that set. That's how popular these dungeons get, is that even after they've been vaulted, people still want to purchase them. And Forsaken is very old. So Destiny 2's done a great job keeping things live. Bungie Studios, good job. Uh, with Bungie being bought out by Sony recently, I'm really hoping that there is going to be no exclusive content for PlayStation. And the reason I say that is because I really like Destiny 2. I want to continue to play, and it really hurts my soul as a gamer when you make exclusive content to one system or another, because that's something that not every player can now achieve. You're robbing me or other players the ability to get that item just so you can try to push sales of your equipment. And it really does kind of hurt me in wanting to play the game more when that happens. So some interesting things in Destiny 2 faucets that you may not know. So it's cross-platform. It can be played on PC. It can be played on console. PS4, PS5, Xbox, Xbox Series S, etc., etc. Well, they separate the console players from the PC players because it's believed that PC players have an innate advantage using mouse and keyboard as far as reaction times are concerned. Personally, I think that that may be true. In fact, I know it is because I've seen YouTube videos where they prove reaction time on a controller is slower than on a keyboard and mouse. But I think the training of the brain, the actual this key equals this action, is equal on both. So I don't know. So, but they separate for group activities PC and console people to take away that advantage. Now, what they will also do is, if you have a friend that's on PC and you're on console and you want to group with them, you can, but they throw you all into the PC queue so that you're always playing with PC people. Just a little nuance. Rift, if you remember that game, tried a similar thing with lag queuing, where it would actually group people by the lag their systems had. It was a novel idea. It didn't help Rift any, but again, it's just a system, an advantage that Bungie has thought of and put in the game for you. Another thing they've done is a ton of customization options, a relic that shapes how you want it, a weapon crafting system, and overall a storyline that still kills, still is continuing. In fact, that would be one of my knocks on Destiny 2 is the amount of content and storytelling. But any game that's over a decade old and can still tell a magnificent story, oh my god, props to you guys. The one complaint I have about Destiny 1 and Destiny 2 is the lore. The lore is awesome. It is deep. I don't know where they got these story writers from, but you can't find all of it in game. You literally have to go to Wikipedia or YouTube or something and look this up to get the lore from A to Z. And I have done so. Now, I'm not going to include that video here that I found because it was like 3 hours long. But this guy had the history of Destiny 2 from before the game to after the game. I don't know where he's getting all this information from, but he made a 3 hour long video. That's how deep this lore is. And before anybody jumps up and says, World of Warcraft. Yes, World of Warcraft has a deep lore too. This is deeper. There are nuggets and hints and Easter eggs all over. That's why you have to go to Wikipedia or YouTube or some fan page to put them all together. It's not just a story they're telling, it's a story they're hinting at, and you have to go find it. And it is deep. I will tell you all that. I'm trying not to give a lot of spoilers. I'm sorry if I have, and I'm also sorry if I'm not being specific enough for anybody. So one thing that really works in this game, which wouldn't work in any other game, is they actually embrace the idea of respawning. How they do that is through Ghost. So if you've never played, a ghost isn't a ghost. A ghost is a machine that resurrects you. So in this game, when you die, your ghost just brings you back. It's going to continue to do it. The ghost saw something in you. You are a hero. You're needed. Bam, back to life. Now think that sounds kind of dumb and dull, but it's giving you a reason why you can respawn, why your hero never actually gets defeated. I think that's kind of cool, kind of forward thinking for a game. Wouldn't you? Okay, now I'm going to go on to hardware. As I said, Destiny's not very demanding comparatively to some other AAA titles, but as this is a gaming show, I'd be remiss not to talk about electronics. Today in specific, I want to talk about Intel. Recently, I was introduced to a new line of Intel processors, more through my fumbling research than actually having one. And what I'm talking about is every processor has variants. i5 6500 has variants, a T variant, a U variant, a K variant. Well, those letters actually mean something. And to get to that meaning, we have to go back to the manufacturer of the chip. And this is all going to become very important to gaming. This is showing you what you need to know about hardware. Just follow me. It's hard to say. So, K means the chip's unlocked, meaning that you can overclock or run it at a faster speed than what it's spec'd at. U means it's underclocked, meaning that it'll run at a lower speed, but it'll save battery. This is usually found in a laptop. T means the chip was flawlessly graded and it'll run at a very high speed for a very long time. That's the enthusiast line, or money is no object, I want the best line. So, how do they, there is some firmware, some program that goes into it, but mostly what it is when they talk about the nanometer architecture, whether it be 10 nanometers, 15 nanometers, that is how small a particle they can zoom in on that silicon wafer and not find a ripple or a dip or a flaw which would cause a problem. Now with those, you're going to have those ripples and dents and flaws in the silicon wafer no matter what. We haven't perfected it to that point yet, but the closer you can zoom in, the smaller piece of a particle you look at that is completely smooth, the more that electricity will travel over that chip without arcing. Now, I'm not talking about arcing like you would see in the movies, like the computer's going to blow up. I'm talking about arcing on a microscopic level, on a molecular level. Now, while that arcing isn't bad in and of itself, it does generate heat. Heat isn't efficient. Heat slows down your processor. So, of course, the better, faster chips have less flaws. And that's how that is judged. Now, usually your T models and your K models cost more than the others because they're more perfect chips. Intel's made a new one. They've made G. And what G is, it's a chip with a very, very, very low frequency basement, sometimes under 1 gigahertz per cycle. So that is such a low processor speed that it would barely run Windows if it was even able to boot Windows at that processor speed. But it will have a burst speed up near 4 gigs, sometimes even higher. And you would think, well, what would you use that kind of chip for? And very simply, think about programming, think about graphic design, think about anything where there would be a lot of time where you spent not using a lot of computational power actually typing out the program script or moving the models together. But then every once in a while you would need a huge amount of computational power to compile the program, to make a 3D model, to put things into a action sequence. This chip's perfect for that. It doesn't use computational power when you don't need it, but it has it available when you do. Now, prior to this chip, if you were doing some of those things, what was your choice? Your choice was to buy a high-end chip to have that computational power available to you when you want it. With these chips with the low frequency basement, they're dirt cheap. This is a great advancement in electronics. And also speaking on Intel, Intel is also getting ready to drop a 10 gigahertz chip, 24 core. That is insane. We do not have chips that fast. And when we talk about chip speed, what I would like people to understand is it's not a measurement of speed. It's a measurement of how many instructions, I'm misspeaking, I'm sorry, how much voltage can be pushed across that chip in a cycle, in a second. And what this determines is how many actions that chip can possibly take in a second, which kind of is speed, but I prefer to think of it more as how many people you can put in a car. So you don't necessarily need a faster car, you need a bigger car to put more people, more data in to get across the highway. Now, on top of that, you can have the biggest car in the world. You can have a 3 million passenger van. If your bus lane, the network of circuits on your motherboard that carry your data, electrical impulse, also has a speed, also has a rating of how much data it can carry at one time. So both those are important factors you need to know. But here's a secondary important factor you need to know about your hardware. IPC, instructions per cycle. Not only how many actions it can take, how many concurrent actions it can take per cycle. And all those are, at least IPC is really hard to find out. Manufacturers usually don't advertise it, but it usually goes up per generation. Now, I said that chip was octa-core, and it is 8 physical cores, right? Which means via simultaneous multi-threading or hyper-threading, potentially could have 16 cores. It does. It does. But here's a problem I have with that. People go out and they buy low low frequency hardware, something 2 gigs, something with 1.3 gigs, and they go, it's got 28 cores, so it's going to be fast. They'll all, not all your cores work together. That's not how this works. Uh, yes, you have multiple cores, meaning that your processor can do multiple things at once. It doesn't have to finish this thread to start that thread because that thread can go to a different core. Unfortunately, we do not have the programming capabilities, much less probably some hardware capabilities would be needed, that we can split up a program and say, okay, bake a cake program. This core is gonna crack the eggs, this core is gonna mix the flour, this core is gonna grease the pan. No, a program has to push all of its data through the same core. It can't break it up and put it back together on the other side. It doesn't work. Via things like hyperthreading, make that even worse. So what hyperthreading does for you is it takes two data streams, two programs, two pieces of instructions, and it lets a single core work on both at the same time. Same thing with simultaneous multithreading, SMT, although it's a little more efficient. Either way, more cores is better, yes. Multitasking is a thing. Having this free core to open up and take this workload is nice, but you're not going to run programs faster just because you have more cores. Because the program still has to push everything through one core. And that's kind of the misnomer that people don't realize that multi-core systems are not exactly faster just because they're multi-core. They typically are because they can now multitask more efficiently by sending programs to other cores, but they cannot split up one program into multiple cores. And Intel is trying to save us from the GPU shortage. Any day now, we are expected to receive Intel Arc Alchemist Arc GPUs. The first generation of these GPUs are going to be on laptops, and then Core 2, we're going to get them from desktops. Now, originally, what I saw on these GPUs is that they were going to be very low spec, uh, probably not much better than the one I have, but at the sub $200 price point. Now I've seen an entire lineup of these things, both laptops and desktops and workstations, that covers the gambit of close to what I have in performance to close to 3090 in performance. It's really great that they're stepping up. Intel's been trying to get a foothold in the GPU market forever. I remember when they hired AMD's chief uh, GPU designer. Still didn't work out. They had a project called Project Laramie. For those of you who don't know what that is when they took a GPU, totally Intel designed, Intel built, and it was so powerful they didn't need a CPU. Basically, it was a system on a chip in a GPU card. It was supposed to be wonderful, and then they abandoned it for no reason. But we're all looking forward to it. They keep saying laptop SKUs are going to drop. They're going to drop hard. We're waiting on you, Intel. Now, the reason for this, though, what nobody's paying attention to, all this massive battle leaping technology that Intel's doing, is because last year they said in about 3 to 5 years they would no longer be able to compete with AMD. Let that sink in. The reason being is they cannot keep up with the amount of research and development AMD and TSCM do compared to them. And they wanted a grant from the US government to build some research and development as well as fabrication facilities in the United States. And while that would have been good for jobs, I mean, put a chip factory in my backyard, how could it work? It would not have maybe been a good deal to give them billions of dollars to do this. They're a company. Are they going to pay it back? But on the other hand, TSSCM, Taiwanese semiconductor manufacturer, it was started by the Taiwanese government. They invested their money in it, and it's doing them well. Apple buys chips from them. Uh, Almost any chip you can imagine that's in some third-party toy comes from them. Phones, garage door openers, little duckies that go quack, quack, quack and robotically walk around the house. That's all those guys. They're going gangbusters. And that's how they started. Now, they did the interview, actually, one of the CEOs at TSCM, and he said, don't do it, America. Don't give them any money. You don't want your people in manufacturing. You stick to what you do best. You design stuff, and we'll build it. I think we should not take his advice. And here's why. Not everybody can design something. I completely admit right here, right now, I could not design a microprocessor. All he's doing is trying to save an economic system that keeps them on top. So I think maybe there was some truth when Intel said in 3 to 5 years they would no longer be competitive with AMD, and they're going to push the envelope with everything they have left to try and stay alive. I personally have always liked Intel. AMD, ever since the K6 generation, has always been a strong competitor, all the way up to the Vision series. Once they came out with their Vision series, they did kind of fall off, and they tried to go more of a corporate way, more of machinery and business style machines. But then they came back with Ryzen, and it's back on again. You know, it's really hard to explain to somebody the numbers, the i3, the i5, the i7, the i9, the Ryzen 3, that 3 and 3 don't cross boards with each other. They're not comparable to each other. Usually the Ryzen counterpart is in between the i counterpart, meaning a Ryzen 3 is really kind of between an i3 and an i5. But that's hard to explain. You just have to look at the raw speed numbers, the IPC numbers, the cache numbers. cache is also very, very important when it comes to gaming. So the cache they're talking about is a little piece of RAM stuck directly outside the processor because that bus has to stop at your RAM and take info to the processor. So info that's going to be accessed multiple times, often all the time, and pretty much needed instantaneously, it tries to put in that cache so it doesn't have to wait for the bus because that person is always waiting outside the bus stop, right outside the building. The bus doesn't have to go get him, and that's basically the purpose of a cache. So the larger cache you have, the more data you can have at that instant availability spot. Now, some of you out there may know who Carla actually is. If you do, I would like you to thank her for the show, tell her how great you thought it was, and tell her, "Hey, you guys, would you like to do a dungeon with me?" Now, people out there may wonder why I'm not using her real name, and it's simply because of this. When I mentioned I was doing the show, I was told that if I mentioned her name, I would be killed in my sleep. So, and she said it in the voice which meant she was serious. The voice of, "Don't involve me in this, I'll kill you in your sleep." So, everybody still thank her, congratulate her for a great show. She has since, because I've actually done 4 of these recordings trying to get things right, still not there yet. She has since said that she will actually be on the show. So let's make this a great show. We can get her involved. It'll be awesome. Thanks a lot, everybody, for viewing. Thanks for just being there, being a wonderful person. And I'd kind of like to end the show with a thought. Do we live in a world where we have to be perfect? Or do we live in a world so perfect that we look for faults in others so that we do not have to be perfect? So, good night, everybody. Have a wonderful day. And I will talk to everyone later.